Globespan is a Guyanese dialogue moving towards the realization of one nation in one Guyana. It's a platform that offers an all-inclusive discussion with the pros, the cons, the ones that have taken a side, and the ones that stand in the middle. Globespan believes agreeing and disagreeing are part of the nation building. Globespan believes that every Guyanese voice is part of the nation building. As we span the globe for voices from the diaspora and those living home, we stand on our commitment that we are all Guyanese working towards one nation in one Guyana. This land is our land now. As the world turns on its axis, bringing changes, we as Guyanese must adapt to those changes for a better Guyana for all. Globespan stands on its axis with its belief that one nation, one Guyana, one destiny must include voices from all corners of Guyana.
So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this evening. We will discuss this evening American security operations off the coast of Venezuela and very close to Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, Caribbean waters, and their implication of the American presence in the region, security issues pertaining to Nicolas Maduro, Venezuela, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, and the greater Caribbean region. Joining us for our discussion tonight are two esteemed gentlemen, scholars in their field. Mr. Mike Singh, who is no stranger to this program, himself a security expert, an expert in so many other areas. He wears many, many hats, an investor. He is a Middle Eastern expert, and he has friends around Southeast Asia as well, of course, in the United States and the Caribbean. Now, I'll let him talk a little bit more about himself. And then we have, for the very first time, Mr. Ross Milosevic. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correct. He's a risk management security consultant. Mr. Milosevic lives in Australia. He's an Australian citizen. Well, actually, he has lived in many different places, especially of late. He's a very highly experienced, independent international security specialist, also in the field of military intelligence and risk management consultancy. His expertise spans across personal protection, security management, covert investigations, intelligence collection, crisis management, among other qualifications. He is, I think, the most qualified among all of us, along with Mike Singh, certainly more qualified than me, in discussing security matters pertaining to the Caribbean region and the American Trump military presence in the region. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us to discuss this very, very important subject, this contemporary issue that's occupying the minds of people in the region and including people around the globe. Mike, it's been a while since I've been in the program, so if you want to spend a minute to talk a little about yourself, and I'll do the same thing with Mr. Ross Milosevic. You want to go first, Mark, about yourself, and then we'll talk about the topic.
Okay, thank you. Good night, everyone. And very happy, very honored and pleased to have my esteemed friend and colleague, Rob, all the way from Oz, down under, gracing our program. And, as a Commonwealth cousin of ours, we're not going to talk about cricket because I've seen Dennis Lilly in action. I could never recover.
Yes.
And I think, Ross, you've also got some links to Venezuela. You've spent time, you've worked in the area, you understand our region, I think better than many people. Many Guyanese should know me by now. I was back home, as you know, Vishnu, leading the Transparency International Electoral Observer Mission alongside. And I must say I was treated with the highest degree of respect and professionalism. I'm happy the elections is behind us, but like most Guyanese, I'm extremely worried. And in the interest of transparency, how did I meet Rob? Rob, we have a mutual friendship with Eric Prince. And I think if you brought Eric Prince on this program, that'd be a great touchdown, just like winning the Super Bowl. So Ross and I have been talking, and I said, Ross, you have so much knowledge. And today, Guyana is in uncharted waters, as I must say. So, this thing about Venezuela is extremely important. The bombing over the last few days has left many people unnerved. And I'm just happy that I have knowledge, experience, contacts, and relationships that I can leverage, such as Ross, to be here to share those things. And I'm very happy once again, Vishnu, to have you on the show. And of course, Nuhar and others for hosting us.
Yeah, let's hear from Ross Milosevic. You want to spend a few minutes talking about yourself, your background, and how you managed to get on the program?
Well, firstly, thanks very much for the invitation and having the chance to talk to you guys and get to know you better. It's been a while since I've been in Washington, D.C., a few years actually. Last time I was here to see Eric and help out with some people that were having some issues in Myanmar, Burma. And I brought them across to have a chat to Eric, and yeah, it was a interesting meeting and so forth. But my background is, where do I start? It goes back a long way. I've been traveling since I was 16 years old. I lived in Yugoslavia, well, the former Yugoslavia. My father is Serbian born, came to Australia in 1958. Married my mother, who's from a Scottish Welsh background.
Mhm.
She was a policewoman, or one of the first policewomen in Darwin in the Northern Territory, of 5 women. So she was a bit of a trailblazer in the law enforcement community. And my father was actually, a partisan at 13 years old and got shot twice as a runner between the Russian lines and the front lines with the Germans. So the military and law enforcement investigations sort of maybe run in my blood, and the chance for adventure has always been there in regards to travel and looking at different cultures, languages, etc. I speak 3 languages. I understand 4 others. So, in my past, after my football career came to an end due to a knee injury, I joined the Army Reserves and got into civil security. And after traveling to Vietnam, I come across an issue that related to both the Australian military and the American military, which then led me to the Australian Embassy in Washington, D.C., running the security unit for 3 years. I resigned and then fell into the international risk management areas of corporate and civil security. So it's taken me to about 23, 25 different countries, and a lot of that time was actually spent in South America, Venezuela, Colombia, Cuba, in which I was working as an advisor for telecommunications companies, oil and gas in Venezuela. So I know the country very well. My wife is Venezuelan. That also provides me a very close relationship with the country because I still have her relatives that are still living in the country. I have many friends that still are living and working in Venezuela. So it provides me a very, a level of competence in understanding what is going on within the country right now and has been since 1998, and how it's transformed from the Chavez regime right through to his unfortunate death, and then Maduro taking over, etc. So I've seen that transformation take place within the area. But then on top of that, you know, the experiences that I've had in Iraq, I've spent 7 years in Iraq as a security consultant for a telecommunications company out of Sweden, and providing, you know, risk management to a number of companies. And then all my time in Southeast Asia, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Myanmar. It's a very diverse, dynamic type of activity that I've been providing for both corporate, civil, and personal, private families that I've been able to work for and provide services that, you know, positive outcomes, especially for the families that I've helped within hostage taking and, you know, incarceration cases that I did in Cambodia for over 5-6 years, which I got 3 Australian citizens out of jail on trumped up charges. So that may cover a little bit of what I've done in the past. And
if I may, you're in Washington, D.C. for a specific reason. If you want to talk a minute on that.
Yes, I've came here to actually run my last marathon. I did the US Marine Corps marathon on Sunday just passed, and it provided you know, a lot of memories, good memories, that I started out in 1996 at the Australian Embassy, and I ran my first marathon and I ran my last, hopefully.
But congratulations. Thank you very much.
Maybe next year as well. Who knows?
So, Mike, do you want to give us a little background? How did we get to the situation of President Trump ordering attacks on military on boats, speedboats, pirogues in the region? What led to that? And and overall, the security implications.
Well, we all know for years that the Huallaga Valley, which straddles the borders of Peru and Bolivia, has been the world's largest coca producing region, coca leaves. The refining, the management, the sales, the admin, the branding of the cocaine industry was never in the hands of the Peruvians or the Bolivians. It was always in the hands primarily of the Colombians. And this has its genesis in a Chilean chap, of all places, going to Colombia and showing to Pablo Escobar and his cronies how this thing can make money. Pablo Escobar revolutionized the cocaine and narcotics industry in his country, from it just being a few cocaine cowboys flights into Miami back in the 80s to becoming, P&L business. At one point, Don Pablo offered to pay off the debt of Colombia because he just had so much cash. And his reign of terror, we all know about it. Eventually, he was, killed. His sidekick, Noriega, pineapple face from Panama, he got a bit ahead of himself and offended the Yanks. He was taken out. So for years, the drug trade coming from South America has had many levels of leaders. You had Escobar from the Medellin cartel, Orihuela brothers from Cali. Now, when I talk of the Orihuela brothers, I say this with great sadness. They tried to double-cross Pablo Escobar, and I think Ross will remember, Escobar took down the entire club, Nogales. He bombed it to prove a point, and the Orihuela people were having a wedding reception for their daughter. Imagine Escobar took out the entire club with the guests and everyone. It was a total mess. So he drove fear. He was the robber baron, like a modern day Robin Hood. He brought in lots of exotic species, the Hacienda Napoles, thanks to Escobar, Colombia today has a very fertile population of hippopotamuses, which are not native to South America. So, and they move up the way up the Isthmus of Panama through Central America to Mexico. And then, of course, you had the emergence of the Sinaloa cartel, one with Guzman, who borrowed his way out of prison with a tunnel. And, it went from cocaine to fentanyl. And Mexico remains today the single largest exporter of narcotics into the US. The mainland Chinese are very involved, and Ross can correct me if I'm wrong, in providing the chemicals and the base material that goes into fentanyl. And if you look at the Appalachian area of the southern United States, North Georgia, Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, Western North Carolina, you see the effects of what, opioid has done to people. You've got people walking the streets looking like zombies. So what President Trump was faced with is act now or be consumed, because the crisis had reached biblical proportions. It's like the bubonic plague about to overtake the US. He simply invoked existing laws to equate narcotic traffickers as terrorists. And under those statutes, he pretty much, the CIA, the NSA, the NSC, they've got a carte blanche thing here. They can go after you. And Americans are not wasting time anymore seeking extradition. I have worked in Afghanistan. I've seen the Grim Reaper drone up close and personal. I'm pretty sure Ross would have seen it in Iraq. And the Americans will use it. If you don't bend to their will, they're going to come after you. Nobody is wasting time anymore with extradition. That's in the past. They're coming with a drone. So you could be sleeping, you wake up dead in another world. You'll be gone. You wonder where the hell this came from. So what's happening with Venezuela, I think the Americans have two strategies they're pursuing. Pressure Maduro to leave and, stop the narco trafficking business. And a lot of this narcotics, gentlemen and listeners and viewers, it comes from Colombia to Venezuela and into Guyana. Last year, August, there was a major drug bust in the Northwest region, about 4 to 6 tons of cocaine in a remote area. And a few days after, the local police commander, he was removed he got reassigned. And then a few months after, there are OFAC sanctions against that very commander. So Guyana has become an important entrepot hub for the export of narcotics and conflict gold, moving from Venezuela into Guyana and then into these homemade subs, crossing the Atlantic to Africa and up into Europe, maybe through North Africa. But a lot of that money is also being used to fuel mining activities in countries like Guyana and Suriname. And you can read Bram Ebers's report on this that was published in the Miami Herald a little more than 2 years ago. So what Guyana and Trinidad are faced with, it's between a rock and a hard place. If you don't, if you do or you don't, it doesn't really matter. And the United States has got massive hundreds of billions of US dollars of investments in Guyana, especially in the energy sector. I remember watching a video with my dear friend Alistair Rutledge saying that Exxon's investments alone in Guyana had gone northwards of $60 billion. I mean, that's a sizable chunk of change. And no American administration, be it Trump or whoever, President Trump, are not going to sit down and allow that type of investment for a major US multinational to be threatened from within or outside. So what we are seeing here is it's new for us in the Caribbean, which is being called a zone of peace, but it's anything but a zone of peace today. And Guyana will really have to up its game in terms of being prepared, strategic deterrence, and so on. So I'll rest my case there. I'm certain, Ross, you can pick up very nice.
Anything to add for us to understand the background of what led President Trump to carry out these attacks? And there have been at least 10 attacks on these mini boats allegedly carrying drugs.
It's 14 now.
There's quite a few.
Yeah, it's 14.
14.
Well, we all know that the drug trade it's been around for a very, very long time. Even goes back to many, many centuries ago during the Chinese opium trade and the British and so forth. But touching on what Mike said in regards to the fentanyl and the Chinese trying to persuade President Trump, possibly today or tonight, Chinese time, in South Korea, where he's had President Xi. I think he needs to really pressure President Xi, where he can reach out to the triads that are operating not just in Mexico, they are operating in Canada big time. The amount of fentanyl and drugs that have coming and heroin coming through Vancouver, which is controlled by the triads, are at a dramatic level. And the DEA know it. All the police forces, Interpol, etc., around the world know that Vancouver is one of the main ports where drugs are coming in from Southeast Asia and different avenues. So there has to be much more valid strategies that will put President Trump in the driver's seat to make sure that Xi will abide by some form of agreement that he will go after the triads. But I have very little expectations, you could say, that he will do it, because the CCP have always taken a cut from these triads, whether it's drugs, whether it's the scam trade, which is operating in Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. The amount of money are in the billions that people are being scammed online through phone calls to the elderly and so forth, not just in the United States, but Australia, the UK, Europe, all around the world. Now, that money is also going back to CCP coffers. I know that for a fact. I ran my company business in Cambodia for nearly 3 years, and the contacts that I've made in the intelligence communities and the military, etc., has provided me an insight to see that, unfortunately, the Chinese government do not want to play by the rules, and this has to come to a stop. And I think Trump is the only president or the only leader in the Western Hemisphere that will be able to put enough pressure on Xi to say enough is enough. And that will go towards Maduro or whoever is involved in the drug trade. It has to come to a point where we must, how can I put it?
But hold that thought. We'll come back to it. Let's go for a break for a minute. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Oil is transforming Guyana, and the entire Caribbean is watching. But beneath the promise of prosperity lies a deeper risk, the rising threat of climate change. Oil and Climate Change in Guyana's Wet Neighborhood explores this high-stakes intersection of economics, politics, and the environment. Author Yves Lloyd Griffith takes you inside the region's oil ambitions and reveals how climate vulnerability could shape its future. This isn't just a policy debate. It's about coastlines vanishing, livelihoods shifting, and choices that will define generations. Packed with insight, data, and sharp analysis, this book is essential reading for anyone who cares about the Caribbean's future. Are we on a path to progress or peril? Dive into the story that affects us all. Oil and Climate Change in Guyana's Wet Neighborhood by Yves Lloyd Griffith.
So again, thank you for rejoining us. You are watching Globespan 24/7. We are discussing the implications of President Trump's security attacks or military attacks in the Caribbean region off the coast of Venezuela. Just for clarification, the two preceding speakers, Mr. Mike Singh and Ross Milosevic, both of whom addressed the issue of drug trafficking in the region that has brought us to these presidential authorization for military attacks on boats in the region. And there could be further action on land very, very soon, which I suppose the two speakers will talk about. And just for us to understand, drug trafficking, the South American region is known for cocaine trafficking, and fentanyl is mostly Mexican trafficking. And so the president is addressing both cocaine as well as fentanyl. And Mr. Ross Milosevic was also talking about the role of President Xi, who is meeting President Trump tonight, our time, at about 10 p.m. They are currently in South Korea, where they will be holding some kind of a summit, APEC forum. Gentlemen, thank you again for joining us. Mr. Milosevic, please continue.
Thank you. Where was I? I mean, in regards to the Maduro regime, you know, Venezuela has been a transient point for drop-off for the drug trade. And since I was working there from 1998 right through to 2016, I was involved in one case where one of the largest shipments of cocaine was going out to Jamaica. So all these drop-off points, whether it's Guyana, Trinidad Tobago, Jamaica, Aruba, they are drop-off points that will then go into other parts of Florida, Louisiana, Texas. They'll be dropped off, flown in, whatever ways that they can get the drugs in. Over many, many years that I've worked in the South American and Caribbean, this seems to not have any type of solution. We manage through the DEA, our drug enforcement agencies, etc., in the United States, who do a fantastic job. I've worked with them, and they are very, very professional in wanting to stop the trade from bringing this evil substance in to wreck so many families and so many lives. So they have that dedication and ability to try and stop this from happening, but it continues. It's gotten worse. It hasn't gotten any better. So I think President Trump has come to a stage where he said enough is enough. And many people disagree with what he's doing. I can see the reasoning behind that. But at the same time, there has to be some ramifications. There has to be a line drawn in the sand where this has to stop. Yes, demand is going to be everywhere. People are people. Human beings are a very flawed species, I always say. And there are ones that like to do these things and they make money from the unemployed. They make from those people who lack confidence in their lives and they turn to drugs, etc. But this has gotten to a stage where fentanyl, cocaine, heroin are taking lives away from families. And it's gotten to such a stage where I think President Trump has said, we're going to go after these people, we're going to have ramifications. And I hope that will not just go to the people that are running the drugs out of Venezuela or Colombia or Mexico or wherever. You need to go after the snake's head. And I hope that pressure, we don't know, we'll have to see and wait and see just if Maduro and his cohorts, Diodados is a one that is very highly involved with his colectivos in Caracas and across Venezuela, providing the assets to try to run these drugs out to other countries. So I have to agree with President Trump. I think there needs to be high ramifications, and I think he's doing that. He's sending a very strong message to the Maduro regime to say, if you don't stop, things may get even hotter and more intense, directed at the country itself. But by saying that, I don't mean at the people of Venezuela. The people are being downgraded by the regime. And these people at the top are controlling this vice that is happening within the drug trade and others. They're involved in other forms of criminal activities, which also need to be stopped, but the drug trade is the main target. And I think in time we will see a possible more intolerable activity, you could say, that will hopefully bring a new era in Venezuela's political environment. And I hope that will change for the better for the Venezuelan people. And as Mike knows, since 2000, I think 10, there's been close on 10 million people leave Venezuela. My wife being one, and virtually her whole entire family have left Venezuela. I have a sister-in-law in Houston, Texas. I have one in Australia. There is a few in Spain, one in Italy. So they've all gone to different parts of the world. And many of my colleagues that I work with in the oil and gas industry are now working in Dubai, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait. They've all left Venezuela. And this has had a dramatic effect on the economy and in the oil and gas industry, because they've had to bring in people from Iran, China, Russia to maintain and get their oil producing back up to a level in the last 10 years that it once was. Since 2000, say 6, 8, a number of oil refineries had terrible accidents. A lot of people died from the explosion in these refineries. only due to the incompetence and level of maintenance that were being provided by people who had no experience whatsoever in the oil and gas maintenance trade. They were putting in people that were only there because they were Chavistas, and the people that weren't were let go. They were told to leave and had no future in Venezuela. So they left. So this has had a dramatic effect. And as I said, I think it's only in the last 12 months that their oil producing activities have come up to a higher level, which they've been able to, increase their productivity for the economy in the country. But there is still a lot of poverty. I don't think the people in the barrios in Caracas and across the country have really gained anything from the so-called revolution that President Chavez instituted and then carried on by the Maduro regime. So I think in the end, I hope the Venezuelan people will get what they deserve, and they deserve much, much better. They're wonderful people. They're beautiful people. I had the most beautiful time in Venezuela when I worked there. I mean, as I said, I married a Venezuelan, and I have an attachment to the country that if Australia wasn't there, I'd live in Venezuela tomorrow. It's a wonderful country, great environment, and has many, many good things about it. So I hope and I wish and I pray that the Venezuelan people will get a better life in the near future. And hopefully the United States will provide a foundation and a platform to bring in other countries that will put pressure on the regime to make a change, to make a change for the better for everyone, both in the region and for the country itself.
Thank you. Mike, you want to talk a little about the implications of these military attacks on these alleged boat trafficking in cocaine, the implication for security to Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, let me begin by saying Trinidad and Tobago is exactly at its closest point, 7 nautical miles away from the coastline of Venezuela. 7 miles. In some areas, 9 miles, like Iquitos, Cedros, but there are parts of Trinidad that I know of, it's exactly 7 miles. There's been a deluge of Venezuelan migrants going into Trinidad and Tobago. That's been going on since time immemorial. In fact, Chacon, who was the most prominent Spanish governor of Trinidad and Tobago, they encouraged Venezuelans to migrate. Spanish people of Venezuela who were in Venezuela went to Trinidad. The entire cocoa industry for chocolate in Trinidad and Tobago was actually built on the backs of Venezuelan laborers. So Venezuelans went there in the days prior to and during the last days of Spanish colonial rule of Trinidad and Tobago. I think Trinidad was only ceded to the British Crown just after the independence or just before the independence of Venezuela, which was won with the help of Great Britain. There's a famous Carta de Jamaica, and I recommend our viewers read it. It's about Simon Bolivar's letter to Jamaica when he asked for the help of the British Crown. And there have been exchanges. Many Trinidadians that will tell you, my grandfather, my great-grandfather is from Venezuela. When you run into Trinidadians with names like Bermudez, Santos, Rodriguez in an English-speaking country, they're not really newcomers. Like Paso, Cisus Paso was the head of Nila Masi. His grandparents obviously would have been from Venezuela. You have a lot of Spanish traditions alive in Paramin, the whole Parang festival, the music, the various things they make at Christmas. It all comes from Venezuela to Trinidad. In the 1940s, a lot of Trinidadians had also moved to, a lot of Venezuelans had migrated to Trinidad during the war years to help them in the oil and gas sector. And now this is the third wave of Venezuelans fleeing to Trinidad because of political persecution and basic economic survival. Trinidad, however, has a very rigid policy in dealing with migrants. Guyana, it's a lot more liberal. You can cross, get to any port of entry with your cedula, your ID card, which Ross will be very familiar with, and Guyana will take you in. And you will get access to free education, free health care, but that's now become a liability for Guyana. In 2017, a recommendation was made by the International Organization for Migration and a company that I represented to the Granger administration. A recommendation was made jointly on how they could improve border security in terms of secure comms. The Granger administration said they had no time for this. All they were required was to spend a measly $200 United States dollars per month per site to give them guaranteed connectivity in the most remote areas of Guyana back to the immigration head office of the Ghana Police Force in Georgetown. They were not willing to spend $1,800 US dollars per month. And that would have really helped to secure our borders. Honestly, I believe it was the People's Progressive Party government in power. They would have said, Mike, let's do it. Because I think they have better vision. David Granger must be held accountable for a lot of crap that's gone on in Guyana, including this whole lax, loose border. And you know my past links with Desmond Hoyt. He was a good man. But the people that came after him were total numbskulls, if I have to use that word. So the open borders, the IOM proposed using the software, and I think Ross, you would know the IOM has an amazing immigration software they've used in Iraq, they've used in Afghanistan. It was being made available free of charge to Guyana, and Guyana turned it down. Guyana's immigration system is running something provided by Canadian banknote, but the data collected does not belong to Guyana. It remains a proprietary content of Canadian banknote. The International Organization for Migration, which is a UN agency, was making that software available free of charge and could still be implemented to Guyana. And all the data collected remains the property of Guyana. It's not too late to fix a problem, but you must have the political will. Forget about CARICOM. They're fifth columnists. The people within CARICOM are the fifth wheel to a coach. And I could go on record, as I've said, Mia Motley, Ralph Gonzalez, Gaston Brown, the joker that runs Grenada, they're all on the payroll of Maduro. The only CARICOM leader, well, President Finale is in a catch-22. He don't have a choice because Venezuela wants 3/4 of Guyana. So, you know, he's going to rule with the tide. But the only Caribbean leader that I salute is Kamla Prasad Bises of Trinidad and Tobago. She is the Margaret Thatcher of the Caribbean. And as we say in Spanish, Ross, she's got cojones. This woman, we need more Kamla Prasad Bises in the Caribbean. And she can leave CARICOM. What has CARICOM done lately? CARICOM cannot help a blind man to cross the street. All you've got in there, it's a whole bunch of people that reminds me of Neville Chamberlain and his famous Brolly. Chamberlain acceded to Nazi demands to take the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia. He had acceded to the demands of the Anschluss, which the Germans call the Union, but I call the rape of Austria. And then he got caught up in all the nonsense that took place at the Munich conference. And he came back with his brolly and he said to the British Parliament, peace for our time. In less than a few months, the Nazis were going straight into Poland. They had taken over the Sudetenland that already annexed Austria, and they were moving straight into Poland. Appeasement does not work. So Kamla Prasad Bises, say what you want about her. As I've said, she's got cojones, she's got conviction. I've got all the time to talk with her because she's not second-guessing. She's strong, she's committed, she's got conviction, and she is not afraid to roll the dice. She will get the job done. Mia Mottley is no different than Zoran Mamdani. Mia Mottley needs to be sent to Kamchatka, especially in January. She will never become Secretary General of the Commonwealth. Ralph Gonsalves, he reminds me of Vidkun Quisling, the Norwegian traitor who sided with the Germans in the invasion of Norway during World War II. That's a Vidkun Quisling. And they set up poor President Ali, who should have known better, to go to St. Vincent for some accord with who? With Maduro? I'd rather take my chance with the Taliban than with the leadership of CARICOM. At least I know the outcome.
With that said, let's hear Ross a little about the security implications for Guyana of Maduro's actions and threats.
Well, that's a very good question. And it's very important because Guyana, as we know, it's only a very small country and has a very large land border with Venezuela, and trying to control that border is extremely difficult. They don't have the resources, they don't have the people, they don't have the ability to implement an effective strategy for any type of incursion, or for that matter, coming in, bringing drugs or taking gold out, or, running operations that are illegal and criminal. So there's a lot of implications here for Guyana on many levels. Not just that, but also trying to coerce the government, its people, into running alongside the Maduro regime and its allies that it's close to. So there's a dynamic of change politically, which they would like to see happen. They think the revolution has worked in Venezuela, but they would like to expand that. And, there is opportunity here for Venezuela and its allies that are operating and have been operating in Venezuela for a very long time. Cuban intelligence, Russian intelligence, Chinese, Iranian, etc., etc. So there are some very high high dangerous, that's probably the better word, dangerous activities that have been going on within Venezuela and trying to expand its wings throughout the region. So having the Chinese having its tentacles reach Central America, Mexico, South America, it's bringing in a lot of wealth that will be able to coerce people like it's done in Southeast Asia, in the Asia Pacific, New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Fiji. And this is one of the reasons why Australia is very concerned with China's activities in the region, in the Asia Pacific region. With that money they have been making over the last 20 years, it's provided them the ability to bribe people. They don't play by any rules. They do what they want to do, and they provide people with an avenue which doesn't have to be seen by the general public. People get rich very quickly. And in places like Guyana, Trinidad, Tobago, Nicaragua, El Salvador, wherever in these poorer countries within Central and South America, they're easy to coerce. And this is an important factor for Guyana. They need to be aware and try to put in place the security strategies that will help them protect from these elements of political and military and intelligence activities that are been happening in the region for many years, but more so in the last 5 to 8 years. So we have to be very, very aware that Guyana is a target. It has some very interesting resources in its country: gold, oil and gas, etc., etc. So this is a prize for China and for Russia and for Iran, etc. These elements are an important factor to grow the arm of their political ambitions around the world. And people say, oh, the Cold War's over, that it never finished, it never ended. Yes, the Chinese, the Russians came down to a very low level, but they've come back and they've learnt from their mistakes. They know communism doesn't work, so they turned into a socialist, capitalist entity, and they've been making money ever since. And they've reached out and started to branch into Africa, Southeast Asia, Central America, South America, and even Australia and the Asia Pacific. So we have to take these threats, well, not threats, this coercive political activity that's happening around the world. And they're doing it in a very, very intelligent way. And they're doing it beautifully. So we have to have the leadership in our Western societies, which we don't have, unfortunately. We've lost a lot of our cojones, as my colleague puts it. And President Trump is one of the only ones in our Western democracies at the moment who've got the ability to, and hopefully, change the direction of how we deal with this situation, because we have to deal with it very quickly, because we are losing ground and have been for many years.
Now, I don't know if you're aware, Ross, or Mike is, a few nights ago, Sunday night, there was an explosion in the heart of Georgetown. At least one person was killed. It is believed that the person who carried out this, perpetrated this attack is a Venezuelan national, or at least one of them. We don't know who were the intelligent planner behind the attack. It could be from across the border. Certainly, the person who carried out this attack had to have some kind of training to build this kind of device, to set it and to think about leaving it, putting it, placing it at a gas station that could have led to a very catastrophic explosion. Fortunately, it was a quote unquote relatively small explosion, but for Guyana, it was huge, major, because it shattered, rattled buildings hundreds of feet away. So one has to take cognizance of security implications of the Venezuelan presence, illegal Venezuelan presence in Guyana, and Mike talked about it a little bit, about monitoring the movement across the border of Venezuelans coming into Guyana. So, Mike, you want to talk some more about that?
Yes, thank you. There are a number of ways. I think the first thing Guyana should invest in is 2 radars that sweeps the south and the north of our country, so we get a 360 degree. We need to have highly trained people, the Guyana Defense Force, the Guyana Police Force. To be honest, the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. I think there are many good people in those forces. They're hardworking, they mean well, but they're being given a wicker basket to fetch water. They don't have the tools, they don't have the appropriate human SIG-INT training, and Guyana has never had to deal with a terrorist attack. The questions I ask: where are your trauma centers? Are they level 1, 2, 3, 4? First responders, do we even have a seasoned or trained counterterrorism response team? Who do we have in the Guyanese military that are trained or seasoned to undertake sensitive hostage negotiations? You know, a lot of people are coming into Guyana. For instance, during the last election, one thing I noticed, there were a number of Commonwealth citizens voting in these elections because there is a loophole that says, if you are in Guyana, you're a citizen of the Commonwealth and you're there for at least a year, you can register to vote. That means you have access to Guyanese ID, possibly a passport, a pathway to getting land from the Central Housing and Planning Authority, setting up a business. They've been a great number of Bangladeshis in Guyana. And I want to tell you about Bangladesh. It's today the bazaar for very extremist thinking. Bangladesh today, though it's run by a man I have great respect for, he's a friend, Dr. Muhammad Yunus, the Nobel Peace Prize winner. Bangladesh is just as bad as Pakistan, because you've had a lot of Islamic radical thinkers that have shifted into Bangladesh. And India, you know, is being targeted. In Pakistan, you have people like Lashkar-e-Toiba, the Haqqani network, all these bad guys, you know, they all seem to love Peshawar for some reason, Pesh. And I think the only one person in Pakistan who could really make a difference in governing the country is Imran Khan Niazi from the Tehreek-e-Insaf. Regrettably, the Sharif brothers have thrown Imran Khan into jail, and he continues to be persecuted. His sister was being stopped from leaving the country. So these people from these 2 countries have come to Guyana. They've been allowed to vote. My question to the President of Guyana, to the Minister of National Security of Guyana, what mechanisms were used to vet or to do security background checks on any of these persons that have made their way to Guyana and are now in possession of Guyanese identification papers? That is a fair question. What procedures President Irfanali and Minister Onij Waldron that were used to vet the identity of these persons. My word of advice to the American Embassy in Georgetown, to Ambassador Terrio, I would be hard-pressed if I was sitting behind the glass in Kingston at the U.S. Embassy to grant any of these persons who've arrived there in the last 5-10 years from Bangladesh or Pakistan a visa to travel to the United States. I'll be very hard-pressed because Guyana, I know, have no way of vetting who these people are. You have literally created a Pandora's box. That's a Trojan horse. We don't know.
So, Mike, you're talking about a different kind of security issue now. So, if we could refocus back now on the Venezuelan threat.
Well, the Venezuelans are already there. This is like trying to close the stable door after the horses have bolted. In 2015, 2013, when this thing of Venezuelan migration manifested itself, Guyana should have gone to the US and its Western partners and the IOM and say, look, we are being overwhelmed by persons coming from the West, and we can't handle this. What can we do? And as I said again, the deluge started when David Granger became president. They were in power, and they're the ones who should be brought to account, including the then Minister of Foreign Affairs, the then Minister of Home Affairs, because it was under their watch. So what the current government has to deal with, do we know how many Venezuelans are in Guyana? I would say at least 200,000.
But it's a sizable number.
Yes, but you don't know, a lot of them are Guyanese they got Guyanese citizenship through one or both parent, a spouse. A lot of these people I have seen walking around in Guyana from Venezuela, they move in groups of 2, 3, and 4, and they look very able-bodied, and they have this type of military swagger. How do we know there are no sleeper cells in the country? And I'm not being xenophobic towards Venezuelans, because many of them that have come to Guyana have been a blessing in the construction industry, in the oil and gas. They've taken jobs Guyanese can't do or have just refused. But at the same time, we need to have a balance. We just can't have people running around this country and we really don't know their real identity. This is like, giving a burglar the key to your home and say, make yourself at home. So we have to implement AI. There are lots of AI programs, know-how. We need to work with our Western partners to train our people, and we have to invest a lot of money and resources in upping our game, upping our preparedness, and being prepared. As it is today, the Guyana Immigration Authority, with all due respect, when you walk in there, I think I've arrived in Victorian India, and I'm about to, step onto Indian soil as the guest of the British East India Company. There's so much paper Have you gone to the Guyana Revenue Authority? You're drowning in paper. The place looks like a relic of the Raj. You're literally looking at shelves of reams of documents. So the president has been talking about digital transformation, the ID, but just too much paper, and things need to be done real time. Digital transformation of Guyana must become the number one priority, because once you have digital identity, digital footprint, and all of these things done, then you can have a better handle on your national security situation. You must also get rid of all this spy gear you've gotten as a gift from China, Huawei. There's so many, the body cams some of these people are wearing are from Huawei. You've got the so-called smart city run by Huawei. Come on. Do you really think Huawei is your friend? China wants your resource. I remember the Chinese #2 in Guyana was saying Guyana shouldn't bother to go to the International Court of Justice. Forget about it. Let China help you make peace by having a bilateral discussion with Caracas. That's suicidal. So the first thing is securing our ICT and telecoms networks, removing all this Huawei spy game from the network, removing all the Chinese spyware from the National Data Management Authority, removing all the Chinese spyware from the Guyana Defense Force and Guyana Police Force. So those are the most fundamental but necessary steps that must be undertaken.
I'm glad you brought up those points, because I was going to ask Ross what recommendations, suggestions he would make to address these security implications. Ross, you want to jump in?
I think my colleague Mike made some very, very good points. One is education, and one is strategic management of finance, and putting money into the education of your military, your national security, law enforcement, and immigration and customs. Those four bases need to be professionally run to protect your identity as a country and your information. And your telecommunications is one of the most important. I've seen this in Iraq. I've seen it in Southeast Asia and a number of other countries where Huawei and Ericsson, who is a Swedish hardware software producer that makes our Horizon, AT&T, Telstra in Australia, all our high quality telecommunications to work. Now, if that software and hardware is not placed in the hands of well-trained technicians and mechanics, etc., to make the system work correctly for the government, that provides a safety net for intelligence communications for the government. And this is one of the reasons why Optus in Australia will not get any contracts for the Australian government, because they use Huawei software and hardware. This is an important aspect of telecommunication intelligence. If that is not put in place, you do not have control. And as Mike said, education is very, very important aspect of this point, because we must train up our technicians within this industry to be able to then implement not just our own telecommunications activities between friend and family and so forth, but within our government, within our military, within our customs and immigration, within our law enforcement, that is secure. Information is everything. It provides us with the ability to stay safe and to prevent things from happening, like the bombing that just took place the other night. And going back to that point, I'm going to say we know Guyana is has a very porous border with Venezuela. So people are coming across different routes that they've known, and the Guianan customs, military, law enforcement, they don't have the resources to protect every inch of the border. So they know where to go, what times, etc., where to infiltrate. But with technology we have today, with drones, with radar, with different forms of intelligence gathering equipment, it can provide Guyana with the ability to stop certain aspects of this activity. Now, by saying that, there is also the fact that we must realize, where is the money going to come from? Now, as Mike mentioned, $60 billion worth of gas and oil with Exxon and contracts and so forth is a lot of money. Hell of a lot of money. Now, some of that money needs to start going into providing better training, better education at all levels, not just within the law enforcement and military, into your universities, courses where people have the opportunity to get a higher education and then utilizing their expertise after they do their degrees and master's degrees and so forth, and bringing them into the government to help the country bring about a better means of protecting a country and looking after its people, etc. But having that ability to provide for the country from a national security point, it will not just send a message to other countries, to their neighbors and so forth, but it will give a sense of security for its own people. And that is very important, especially after the actions that have, the other night with the bombing. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are asking many questions. How? Why? How did they get in? How did this person make the bomb? It could have been made already and brought across from Venezuela. The gentleman that placed it may have had some technical expertise on being to set it into motion. So he must have had some training. Therefore, if the person that's been caught, or if he's been caught, hopefully there's going to be an ability to gain some information from him. Now, if this gentleman is Venezuelan, then this could have some very damaging ramifications for Venezuela and Guianan relationship. So I think in the near future, we're going to see some very interesting developments within the Guianan government. They've got to make some very hard decisions. If the evidence presents itself that this gentleman is Venezuelan and has had help from the Venezuelan government to put this mechanism in place to destroy and make harm in Guyana, this is a very, very high crime in any country, not just Guyana, but any country. If that was done in Australia or the United States, this is a very dangerous criminal act.
I want to touch one other subject before we close, and that is, do you think the military strikes on these speedboats or any other attacks would deter Maduro's planned actions in the region against Guyana, against Trinidad? As you know, he had threatened both countries over the last 2 days.
Yes, I don't think it will stop them. I think something more effective and harsh needs to be done, unfortunately. And I don't know how far President Trump will go. That's up to him and his administration to make that decision. But we all know, as I said before in our start of our conversation, the drug trade has been in place for centuries. It doesn't stop. It's a trade that, it's older than prostitution. And we've got to understand these people will continue to make drugs from the natural resources they have in Bolivia or Colombia, and then steam it, make it, boil it, and then bring it through places like Venezuela, where they know they're going to get the support to branch it out into other countries and make money. That will continue unless something more harsh needs to be done to the people that are at the top. As I said, the snake's head. But the problem is, even if you take out the snake's head, there's always someone to replace it. It may take a while, but there will always be someone to take over. And it's a curse. It's a human curse. The drug trade is so rampant around the world. It's, as I've said before, it's coming from Southeast Asia, Laos, Myanmar, Burma, one of the biggest producers of poppies and opium. Afghanistan, another major opium grower. So we have to somehow change the whole dynamic of our thinking and education. But the problem I see again, we tried to do that in Afghanistan with 20 years of nation building and trying to change the dynamic of society and so forth. Unfortunately, some places just won't change. And that's the same in Myanmar. I've spent a lot of time in Myanmar, Burma, and it's just a difficult place to change. And unless corruption is stopped in its tracks, it may be possible to change the whole way of thinking within the drug trade. But there needs to be so much done from an educational point, from kids at a very young age, in kindergarten, preschool, through primary school, through high school, and onto university. The whole dynamic of education can change things, but where do we start in places like Afghanistan and Myanmar, Burma, and Venezuela, Colombia, Bolivia, where poverty is so rampant, where making coca can produce food on the table for families in these poor countries? So we've got to somehow join together in much more determined effort in changing that whole mindset and dynamic. But it's a very difficult task.
Well, I'll take that as your final word, unless you have anything else to add. I'll come back to you in a moment if you. But Mike, you want to summarize and offer your recommendations and advice?
Well, I like to just quick point of correction. The word is Guyanese, Ross.
Yes.
We are Guyanese, not a problem. And then I'd be pleased to say that the two main operators in Guyana, Ericsson Equipment is in GT&T, One Communications, because Ericsson inherited that book of business from Nortel, and you have similar Ericsson equipment in Digicel. One other operator is a Huawei shop, and that has to be looked at. That operator also has subsea cables that were built by Huawei. So all of the so-called smart city cameras, which are throughout the length and breadth of the coastline. Everything gets taken back on fiber provided by that company that's basically owned by Huawei. It's taken back to a facility not far from the Arthur Chung Convention Center. Then it's beamed up by a satellite to the Chinese satellite. So data integrity does not exist in Guyana. The people of Guyana do not know where their images, where the mission critical data is being sent, but I can tell you, it's being housed in facilities in China owned and controlled by the acolytes of the Chinese Communist Party, such as China Telecom, China Netcom, and China Mobile. None of those companies are allowed to operate today in the United States. There's no China Netcom, China Telecom, or China Mobile offices anymore in the US, thanks to the Justice Department's decision. Huawei cannot operate in the US, Australia, UK, because of its links to the Chinese military. But in Guyana, Huawei is free to do what it wants. It has contracts. It has provided and embedded itself into the National Data Management Authority. There are Huawei devices, such as modems, sitting in a number of ministries and parastatal agencies of Guyana. And in case the president of Guyana is not aware, I will educate him tonight. Every single bit of data, every email, every keystroke, Huawei is getting that information, and the Chinese will know everything about your negotiating strategy, all your sensitive data, and they will use it against you when they sit down to negotiate. If Guyana is truly a committed friend, partner, and ally of the United States, the government of Guyana will embark tomorrow on an aggressive rip and replace of all Chinese equipment provided by Huawei, such as the National National Data Management Authority, the so-called Smart City. They will remove it. I know for a fact that the United States is hesitant about sharing certain types of information with the government of Guyana because the number one concern is the data integrity and the networks built with money from China, maintained by Huawei, and subjected to the whims and fancies of the CCP. In essence, Guyana is a sitting duck, but only the president, and more so, the vice president, can give the order and it can be changed. They know how to get hold of me. I've been in telecoms for 30 plus years. I've lived and worked in Afghanistan, been in Iraq, Kurdistan, etc. And I can tell you, your data is the most mission critical and competitive trump card you have. And if your enemies can get into beyond your firewall and look at what you're doing, God help you. I believe the Venezuelans are going to go beyond the bombing. There will be cyber assaults, cyber attacks on Guyana's water system. There are going to be cyber attacks on its national grid. There are going to be cyber attacks on its air transport, its civil aviation infrastructure. And they know because you have the Trojan horse. Huawei is already there. And if push came to shove, China is going to side with Venezuela because over the last 20 years, billions of dollars of Chinese arms, Russian arms, and Iranian arms have been sold to Venezuela. I wonder how is Guyana going to defend itself when a volley of Shahed drones begin raining down in Georgetown. If you think the bomb was a wake-up call, wait until you've got those drones headed your way. That is a sobering thing to deal with. And I think you, Ross, I really like you to say something about that with the permission.
Yeah, well, gentlemen, it's 9:01, so we really got to wrap up now. Any final
Thank you.
any final word from Ross for a few seconds?
I hope Guyana government will be able to address these issues very quickly and smartly. But I hope also for Venezuela's sake that they back off, they bring a proper discussion with discourse and be able to communicate with the Guianan government and sit down and make this an important agreement that they both can come to without people being hurt or killed. There is no excuse in today's world, in the 21st century, where we can't discuss. We can discuss and disagree, by all means, but why do we have to go to the point where we start to intimidate, to invade, and to kill? This is past our point in time for our species, and we need to grow up. We really do. But I hope the Guianan government will be able to address, as I said, these issues at a high level that can bring in others like the British Embassy, the American Embassy, Australian Embassy. All our Commonwealth can join hands with the Guyana government and help them address this issue. And I hope that brings about a better way and a better means to peace.
Thank you very much. That should be the last word. Thank you, gentlemen, both Mr. Mike Singh and Ross Milosevic. Thank you very much, gentlemen, taking time off.
Thank you very much for
joining us and
Thank you.
educating us about this very, very important issue tonight. Good night. Goodbye.
Mm.